A UN chief goes to Saudi Arabia. It sounds like the beginning of a joke, but the punchline, not so funny. Joining me now to talk about news from the UN is Pamela Geller of the Geller Report. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Faith.
All right, so UN Chief Antonio Guterres, he goes to Saudi Arabia. He meets with a bunch of folks over there, and he says on the record, one of the things that fuels terrorism is the expression in some parts of the world of Islamophobic feelings and Islamophobic policies and Islamophobic hate speeches. Translation, Islamophobia causes terrorism. Pam, are you buying this? What is this all about?
Well, this fits right into the UN's relentless efforts to compel states that protect the freedom of speech to adopt hate speech provisions that would effectively involve their adopting sharia blasphemy provisions. Sharia restricts the freedom of speech, and this restriction is paramount to the supremacy of political Islam. This denial of the true nature of Islam by refusing to acknowledge the inherent ties to violent jihad is nothing short of a denial of reality, a war on reality. And the idea that anyone, especially President Trump, who says there is even the slightest problem with Islam or radical Islam, is only aiding, let's say, the Islamic State or Boko Haram or Mujahideen or Hamas or the Taliban's propaganda, is saying that the West is waging war upon Islam by defending ourselves. So this, of course, assumes that Islam is a religion of peace, and that the motivation for jihad terrorism doesn't come from jihadic doctrine. So jihadis only become terrorists when we say bad things about jihad. So if we stop doing that, all will be well. The only problem with this crazy scenario of denial is that the Quran's exhortations to the conquest and subjugation of unbelievers are not predicated on what we do as unbelievers or what we say or don't say. This jihad faith will continue, and if we shut up about it, many people will remain ignorant and complacent about the jihadic doctrine and what it advances.
If Islam was a religion of peace, their extremists would be extremely peaceful. And in fact, we see the exact opposite. I am not prepared to surrender my freedoms for the babyish sensibilities of a particular minority. In other words, our freedoms were too hard fought for us just to say, you know what, your feelings really do matter, and so we'll take that into consideration lest we provoke a terrorist attack, which is what this UN chief is warning us about. And one part of me wants to say, look, he's just a useful idiot who works for a multilateral organization that has no teeth. But regrettably, that's not what we're seeing. As you mentioned, there is a jihad creep that is occurring. We see these oil-rich nations like Saudi Arabia, where these comments were made, and we see their infiltration of Wahhabism through their madrasas, through their various funding of everything from the Muslim Students Association to the OIC to just, they're now infiltrating our parliaments here in Canada as well. How serious is the weaponization of the word Islamophobia, and what sort of danger does it pose to our fundamental freedoms in North America?
Well, as I wrote in my book, Stop Islamization of America, a leading Islamic thinker, Abdur Rahman, said that it quoted and said it was a loathsome term used as a thought-crushing device to silence any criticism of Islam. Islamophobia is a Sharia device. And, the OIC, as you mentioned, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is the largest world body, it is 56 countries plus the Palestinian Authority that largely drives the UN. And you see in every resolution, always against Israel, you see the Islamization of the UN, and of course, the relentless efforts to impose these Sharia laws, these speech laws, across the West. Now, freedom of speech is the fundamental founding principle of a free society.
Amen.
And without it, you have tyrants or groups that can run roughshod over everyone else, and that is what we're seeing. Islamophobia is nothing more than a device in which to impose the speech laws under the Sharia, under Islamic law. And once we allow that to happen, and we see that Canada is taking those steps, Faith, then freedom is crushed, and peaceful men will be forced to resort to violence.
And yet it's become such an effective tool. It's as though people are more afraid to be called racist, even though Islam is not a race. They're more afraid of being called Islamophobic than actually dealing with the reality that there is jihad creep, there is blasphemy laws that are being ushered into their country, or even things like Islamic terrorism at the far end of the spectrum. Right now, we've got this motion 103 that our House of Commons is debating literally as we speak. And people are telling us to shut up about it, Pamela. They're telling us, you're Islamophobe. So we've just had a terrorist attack in Quebec. I've had innumerable amounts of tweets that said that myself, my boss, Ezra Levant, folks like yourself as well, who speak out against many of the evils within the Islamic text, frankly. The Quran, if you tell me that it says strike at the hands and necks of unbelievers, I'm not going to sit down and shut up and say that's okay by me. I'm going to point to the fact that there's something wrong with that. And guess what? We live in a free country. You can insult my Bible too. I'm not going to call for your head on a plate. People will say that I've got blood on my hands for daring to engage in free speech in this country. And so we're going to do a huge protective lip service over to the Muslim community and give them this motion saying, Islamophobia is now going to be banned in Canada. What's your message to the Canadian people? Because for me, this political correctness is cultural Marxism by another name. It's a method to shut us up. And if we don't fight this right now, the warnings that we are receiving from Europe and the like are dire. And I think that these are urgent times right now. This is situation critical. How do you see it?
Well, it's bizarre world. You have blood on your hands because you're standing in defense of freedom of speech, but jihadists have no blood on their hands. Actually, it's on the hands of Islamophobes who oppose jihad terror. That's where we are in this age of the absurd. The Canadian Parliament is going to criminalize Islamophobia without even defining it. Now, I'm sure many lawmakers voted for this or will vote for this, probably thinking that they are outlawing attacks against innocent people. But the word Islamophobia is used to stigmatize the honest discussion of the motives and goals of terrorists. The incursion of Islamic supremacists and their allies and lapdogs peddling their wares into the Canadian Parliament is a very serious concern. Islamophobia is and has been and will continue to be, a loathsome term, as I said, that is nothing more than a thought-terminating cliche conceived in the bowels of Muslim think tanks for the purpose of beating down critics. Why is the Canadian Parliament engaging in this? And where are the conservatives in the Canadian Parliament standing up against this faith? That is deeply disturbing.
We've got a Conservative Party leadership race going on right now, and if you believe it, some of the actual candidates, one that comes to mind right now, is actually going to be voting in favor of this. That just tells you how far the overture window has moved, that within even the Conservative Party, this is deemed as an acceptable encroachment on our freedoms. There was a world before these phobias. There was a world before this identity politics hogwash. There was a world that valued and indeed fought for and laid down their lives to defend freedom of speech. And we are duty bound as North Americans who enjoy a God-given right, but a privilege compared to some 200 countries across the face of this planet. We are duty bound to safeguard this right and to ensure that it is interpreted in the maximum definition as opposed to being minimized, especially by a toxic term like Islamophobia. Pamela Geller, I love what you do. I hope you keep fighting for freedom, and we're so lucky to have you in our corner.
Thank you for having me, Faith.
Thanks for watching. Click here to never miss a Rebel update. Want even more of the Rebel? Well, click here to become a premium member.